Hey guys, what is up? It is Rapmark here. So, continuing on the backlog, which there is still plenty of, we are doing the review for Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. So, this is another one that's out of theaters right now, but still, I'm glad I'm doing this one because this movie was actually pretty amazing. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I loved it. Had great references to actual D&D. It is way better than the original one from what was it, the 80s? No, wow, 2000. So, uh, but yeah, it was awesome. Like I love the characters, performances, even the CGI was just top notch in this. And once again, like references, like you have place names like Neverwinter, uh, you know, Baldur's Gate. Like, you have all like just so many references, and some might have gone over my head. Like I when I was younger, I did Dungeons and Dragons a lot, but it's been a few years since I've actually played. I'm a little bit out of the loop, but I mean, I do get the gist of it. I love it. I mean, they have the class characters. You know, you have your typical bard, you have your barbarian, a paladin, um, a druid, a sorcerer, a con man. It's it's super fun. The humor was great. Like there were points where I was just laughing my ass off, and it also had emotional beats to it. There's one point which I'll get to in spoilers where you do feel stuff, and the story itself, you kind of get it. I mean, if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons or just just any story in general, it's just like I see where this is going, but they did it so well, I didn't even mind. And there is a reference to now this was in the 80s, so there was a cartoon, Dungeons and Dragons, uh, and yeah, they actually make mention of it in here. I'll get that in the spoilers as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, the casting was amazing. Like Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez. You have Justice Smith. And this is one of I think Justice's better roles. Like there were some I wasn't exactly too much of a fan of his, and I don't think it's necessarily him. I think it's just the roles he got and the writing that he was given. I mean, he was in Detective Pikachu. Uh, what was another one he was in? He was in. Oh my God, yeah, Jurassic World. That yeah. Um, not not my favorite things from him. But this one, he shined. This was his moment to shine, and he definitely shined in this. Um, let's see who else. So, oh, Hugh Grant. Oh, I loved Hugh Grant in this. So he's the con man, and he's so goofily like insidious that it's just you hate him, but you love the way he plays the role. Like, it's super fun. Um, and then Sophia Lillis, who played the druid, you know, another really fun character because she can change forms. But yeah, this movie had been in development hell for a while. Uh, I mean, it started with Hasbro, and it they decided they couldn't do it, so they had to hand it off to Universal Pictures, and then it ended up with Paramount Pictures, and they were the ones who actually helped them get it across the finish line. And then essentially COVID hit, so it was one of those that I believe was delayed. I'm not sure if it was the filming that was delayed. It says filming began in 2021. So I'm not sure if it was the filming that was delayed or what, but yeah. Yeah, and from what everyone said, like everyone loved it. It did not do as great as they hoped at the box office, and that I think is a little bit sad because it was a fun story. It was a great story with a great cast, just everything. Like the writing was great, um, the music was good, the pacing was great. There's just it's just so much. It was so much fun, and apparently there's a TV spinoff that's coming off on this. And they don't know if there's going to be a sequel. I mean, maybe not if it didn't perform as well. Maybe if the TV series does okay. I believe Paramount is the one who picked it up. Uh, yeah, I mean that would make sense. Paramount pitch, yeah. But yeah, needless to say, I think this was probably one of my favorite movies of the year. Um, and honestly, I'm going to give this a 10 out of 10 because this hit all the points I wanted. It made me laugh. I was entertained. I was never bored. It didn't feel long. I was in it the entire way. Goofiness and all. I mean, this is about a 10 hour and 14 or two, not 10 hour, a 2 hour and 14-minute movie. I mean, and it felt perfect. It literally just, I was in it the entire time and I had a really good time. So 10 out of 10 on this one. Um, that's, I think, going to cover it for the non-spoiler section of this review. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the spoilers, the breakdown, get into all the crazy stuff. And yeah, so I'll see you guys then. Hey guys, it is Rapmark here. So, this is the spoiler section of Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves. So, where we start, so we have our main character, the bard, Edgin. Um, he starts off as a member of the Harpers, which is, an actual order in Dungeons and Dragons. Um, and I mean, you have all sorts of things. Like let's start with some of that. Like you have red wizards. Uh, you know, uh, Edgin's a bard. His best friend Holga is a barbarian. Um, you also have a sorcerer, Simon, uh, and then a rogue, Forge, Hugh Grant. One of my, he's one of my favorite villains. He's just so. Ugh. So it starts with that team. So they are. So his wife essentially gets murdered by the by red wizards. Um, After it turns out, and I'll get to that again, but it turns out he ended up not wanting to just live off poverty and whatever. So he stole some gold without knowing that they had a way of tracking that. So they found the gold, went to his house, killed his wife. His baby was saved. But yeah, his life kind of went downhill after that. So he went to a life of thievery, and that's where he meets Holga, who like they are best friends. It's they are not romantically, and you find out later she's actually attracted to like small men, halflings, which you'll see later. It, so anyway, they get on this one last theft with the team I mentioned. In addition to Forge's acquaintance, Sophina, which turns out to be a red wizard. So they end up raiding a stronghold in an attempt to steal the Tablet of Reawakening so that he can resurrect his dead wife. But they get trapped. Everyone else escapes, but they get trapped, and that's the beginning of this movie. So we then go to the prison Revel's End. So it is in this cold, dark, just isolated thing, and they are going to a sort of parole pardon hearing, and he's set to tell this great heartfelt story, but they're waiting for someone I forget his name, but yeah, and you think it's because maybe he knows him or whatnot, and when he gets there, it's just like no, they grab him, they throw him out the window, and he has wings, so they just sort of ride him down and escape. And it turns out they did that for no good reason, because they ended up being pardoned anyway. Uh, so there's that. Again, just super funny humor. Yeah, and the overview that I did, like that's the story he's telling them, obviously in much more depth, but yeah. So they escape and they go to Neverwinter, where Forge has taken power after the Lord has fallen ill and is comatose, and he's looking after Kira, Egan's daughter. And man, he is just. Here's where the scumminess arrives. It's just like he's essentially turned Kira against him, like that he's selfish, greedy, and that's why he was arrested and was gone for 2 years. And this is where you find out Sophina is a red wizard. And they essentially orchestrated that whole thing just so that he could take Kira and raise her as his own. It's just like, man, you are a total scumbag. And he's just like, well, I've already let know to the authorities that you're here, so they're going to arrest you and take you back to prison. I mean, and that's what his initial thought is. Sophina actually tries to get them executed, but they end up escaping, which is really, which is like the action in this movie was actually really fun, because I mean it starts off like the joke of what does Egan actually do, because Holga's the one that does most of the fighting. He's trying to just cut the ropes and escape this entire time. It's like one of those things where you're a bard and you just roll too low and you can't cut the rope. We've all been there. It's 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 insane, but whatever. And yeah, it's like later he goes into it just like I create the plan, and it's just like what if the plan fails? Well, then I create a new plan, and then I create Plan B, and, and the druid, which I'll get into later, is just like so you make plans that fail. It's just like no, and then someone's just like he plays one hell of a lute or something like that. And it's just like that's irrelevant. But yeah, that's the whole thing is like what does he actually do? He does help out, like in the end and in the final battle, like he does help out, like he does do some things, but it's kind of a running joke through the movie, and it plays out in some fairly hilarious ways. So anyway, after they escape, they decide they're gonna rob Forge and bring Kira home because they're like your parents at this point. I mean, even though they're best friends, they're not together. You know, Kira still sees Holga as like her mom because that's the only mom she ever knew. Like she was a baby when her mom was killed, and you know Edgin obviously her dad. Uh, but yeah, so the High Sun Games were an event that were canceled. Um, they were banned, but Forge reinstituted them because you know he convinced everyone that it would bring money and tourists there. So they obviously have to get the band together. Um, so the first person to go is Simon, and it's just like, you know, it he's doing like the you know this trick. It's just like you know flame, and then it's just like oh I'm blurry, and you know, everyone's just super bored, but what they don't notice is that while he's distracting them up front with his terrible magic, he's pickpocketing everybody. And then they show up and drops all the treasure, and that just starts into a big, huge, like, debacle. A big fight, which is kind of cool because there's something he does to where he kind of shifts, like, gravity, so falling out, it's kind of hard to explain in words, but yeah, it's kind of trippy, but they do end up getting away, and he suggests recruiting someone named Doric, who is a druid, and it turns out they were a couple once upon a time, but she broke up with him because he was kind of sad, angsty, and just kind of toxic. So, like, he's really down on himself. I mean, you find out that, you know, he constantly is trying to prove himself, and he never just feels good enough. So, but yeah. Um, Now, Doric, she is part of a forest community, elves essentially, because they were the only ones that took her in after she was. I for, oh God, what was her backstory? I think she was like abandoned, or her parents were killed, or something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head. I apologize. There's a lot to get in with this movie. So I might forget some things. Um, But yeah, Forge is cutting down the forest for the sake of industry. So the elves are fighting back. She's helping them. When they see her, the owl bear is, which is a thing, uh, is is just totally just nailing all these soldiers down. It looks incredible. Again, I love the CGI. Like it, she changes forms, and it actually looks really good. I was very impressed with the CGI of this movie. It's super fun. So they have these four, um, but they obviously need to do reconnaissance. So you have Doric essentially shapeshift into a fly, goes to the castle and discovers like the vault, which is protected by magic from the Red Wizard, and this starts another quest where Simon can't disable it on his own, but if they get the Helm of Disjunction, then it should increase his magic to the point of where it could disable them. Uh, so it's, and again, one of those magical things that has those weird things. Uh, I mean, the only so there are two references, uh, usually in Dungeons and Dragons, that they did not use in this movie, that I am going to point out. So, Bag of Holding, which will hold everything, you know, running joke of Dungeons and Dragons, because it holds everything, or Indestructible Rocks, which are a thing too. So it never plays those. So it's stupid, it's silly, but it's something I wanted to bring up anyway. But yeah, just bringing up that sort of magical item. In order to find it, though, they need to go. The last place where it was a battlefield, where Holga's ancestors fought, and they had it. And this is probably one of the funniest parts in the whole movie, because they have to go, and Simon is a necromancer, so he can bring people back from the dead, but only to ask them 5 questions. And he's just like, so the first guy they bring up is just like, is this the guy? And he's like, yes. It's just like, that's not for you. Are you sure? Yes. and eventually they just waste the questions on this guy. They only get one question answered that takes them to another thing, and they have to go to this other person, and it like turns out just like, I had it, but then I slipped and hit my head on the table, and that was it. And then they go to another person. It's just like, oh no, that was my twin brother. So, and on they go until they finally find the person that can tell them where it is. So it was given to a paladin, and oh my gosh. So many people are aware of like the OP-ness of paladins. Uh, they're just so good at everything. They're amazing, and they can do all these things. And the way they played this paladin was so amazing, because he is badass. Like, you do see him do some amazing things, but he's just like, it's not my journey. It's not my mission. And he's just, he's there, he helps, but like in a really like side-standing way, just off the beaten path manner, and this comes in at like the right moment. It's just like, I love you guys. You guys did the paladin the way I would love it to be done. So anyway, yeah. So they find out who got it, and then there's another joke which is played again at the very end in an end credit scene. They didn't ask the last zombie the last question, so he's still alive. Just like, can someone ask me a question, please? Damn. It's It's silly. So anyway, the paladin Zenek, I believe is his name or something. Uh, so he make before he guides them to the Underdark to retrieve the helm. He makes again swear to distribute any booty that they get from this mission to the people. And so he agrees. So they do it. But first, they have to go to grab a teleportation staff from Holga's ex-husband, who is a halfling, and he's found someone else, and it's just this really. It is an emotional scene, like a silly emotional scene, if that makes sense. But yeah, it just kind of shows like the aftermath of them actually getting arrested through this manipulation. Like Forge really screwed these two over in a really big way. So anyway, they get into the Underdark. They have to go through the orifice, as the paladin calls it. And yeah, so they go through it, and this is another really fun one because they're in this place. Like at one point, they go by these creatures, and it's just like, stay very still. They will attack anyone with high HQ, and they just walk on by. And it's still just so funny. It's so ridiculous. I'm just thinking about it right now. I was cracking up. I was cracking up so hard. And again, it's just like, well, that's insulting. Because they're all just a bunch of idiots. Whatever. So they get attacked by Thayan assassins. And they finally get and again, this action scene's great. Like, I love it because they can't kill these guys because they're already dead. So I mean, it goes into it. There is a flashback which I forgot about until now, where it shows they essentially suck the soul out of everybody, just to make one person more powerful. But yeah, yeah. So they're essentially like undead. But anyway, so they do manage to fight them off a bit, but in doing so, they waken a obese red dragon, and it's just like. This thing is just so tubby. It's so cute, but it looks like really good. And I'm just like, this is so ridiculous, but so amazing at the same time. And it's just trying to get them. They do manage to get away from that. Again, the action in this movie is great. That scene right there was 100% worth the price of admission right there, in my opinion. So anyway, they get the helm, but Simon is having trouble. He has to prove himself like worthy of it, and you see this person before him, like I think it's like an ancestor. I'm not sure if it's like his ancestor is supposed to be a reflection of him or whatnot. But yeah, and he's constantly like just being beaten down by him, and he just can't achieve mastery over the helmet. So they decide on another one where they use the staff of teleportation um, to essentially so they use like a mirror. They put a portal through the mirror, and they have the teleportation and the mirrors in the wagon that's going into the castle. And the druid's the only one who can do it because she shapeshifts into a worm, and she manages to sneak through the lifted tiny bit of mirror that was gone because it fell flat while in transport. So they couldn't fully get in. But that plan ended up not working out. Um, there is a point where there's like a projection of, again, dancing and but then it starts failing and it looks like really weird. And Gardner's just like, what the heck is going on? It's God, see this movie. Anyway, so Simon does end up being able to use the helmet and gets through, but the room is empty. It's except for a magical trap, and apparently they find out that Forge is essentially stealing everything, and he's just gonna take off. He's done. He's got all this money, so he's gonna take the treasure and Kira with him, because he's a scumbag and wants to be a fake father, whatever. uh, so anyway, they get trapped. They all get captured and are forced to participate in the game. Like at one point, Egan is captured, and he's talking to Hugh Grant's character, and he's just like, "I don't want to see you die, so I'm going to leave the room." And he comes out, it's just like, so to participate in the game. So that's essentially how they all save themselves. So they are forced to participate, and in there it's like a big maze, and that's where you see the reference to the old animated show Dungeons and Dragons, because the team is like one of there's three teams at least that you see that go in, and you see one of them run off, and you see them later trapped in a cage, and then like they're running from like this sort of dragon chimera thing. I forget what it's called, but yeah, and the maze just keeps getting smaller and smaller. I mean, you have the gelatinous cube, which is just a big ball of jelly that it sucks you in and then digests you. Which they do have an interesting scene, a really cool scene where, in order to get through it, because they're trying to escape something. So the druid, in human form, goes through and pokes a hole through the gelatinous cube with her fingers, I guess, and then transforms into a snake. And because it takes a little bit of time for the gelatinous cube to like sort of heal up around the figure, she's able to slip through the hole and through the wall, essentially, which is what they were trying to do. So yeah, so that was kind of pretty cool. Oh my gosh, and they even have a mimic in here. Like, I like how, so the druid finds finds a chest. There's a sword, and then Holga finds a chest that turns out to be a mimic, and she's about to be eaten, and the druid just slices slices through the tongue, and it's just like, "Ah." Man, mimics. They are the nightmare and bane of the existence for many a parties going through any sort of maze or underground tower or whatever. Yeah, it's super fun. So anyway, they find they escape. They find Forge, um, but they steal the boat and rescue Kira after Forge threatened her life because all he cares about is himself. He's just he's a rogue. He's a scumbag. Whatever. So they have a chance to escape, but then they realize that in order to that the games were organized by Sophina as well, the Red Wizard, in order to do the same thing that happened to the people of Tay, where they use a curse that turns them into a mindless army of undead. So they have to go back and with the riches because he gave a promise. They get the riches out of the boat with the teleportation staff into a hot air balloon, and they just start spreading the riches across the city, which empties out the stadium. So she launches this curse, and there is no one in the stadium because everyone's going out into the city to get all the riches. And she's just like, no! And then you have this final boss fight, which is amazing. Like, this is probably one of the best fights ever. So, I mean, you see like all the spells that you'll see in a Dungeons and Dragons like campaign, like you see them all act as just like one of the characters will say a spell and then it'll happen and so on and so forth. Like you see a hand, you see like two spells of hands just arm wrestling. You see like fireballs, bolts of lightning. At one point, Sophina turns a stone dragon into a real dragon. It's so much fun. Like this boss fight was so amazing to see, and you love it. And eventually, Simon does manage to master his magic, and he nullifies Sophina's time stop spell, which allows Kira to use an invisibility. And she slides an anti-magic bracelet on Sophina, so she can't use magic. And then Doric, the druid, goes into owlbear form and just throws her against the wall. It's just like, oh man, she's dead. But then she starts moving a little bit, and then Doric just again throws her into a wall, and then the wall falls down on her. Just like, nope, she's dead. It was a brutal killing. But unfortunately, Holga is fatally injured. So Egan has the tablet, and he essentially tells his daughter that he wasn't trying to raise his mother for her, but for himself. And you know, knowing that Holga was the only mother that she'd actually ever known, he uses it to bring her back. And yeah, so that's essentially what happens. It's not exactly how resurrection works in D&D, but we can wave over that. It's fine. It works out. Now, Doric signals that she's more open to a relationship with Simon, so he's just like, yeah. And the old Lord of Netherwinter, he wakes up and declares them all heroes. So they are now very much more well off. And Zarek, after capturing Forge, sends him to Revel's End, the prison again. So again, he's waiting for the same guy that they did to try to escape, throw him out the window and fly down. But now they've walled it off so that that won't ever happen again. And that's the end. So there is one cutscene which I mentioned where, you know, the guy that they didn't ask the last question to, like, it's just like, can someone please ask me a question? You know, and that's it. And again, I love this movie. This movie was super special. I loved it. And honestly, even though like watch it on streaming, like give this movie some support. This is a really good movie, and I think it's definitely worth a watch. So anyway, I think that is my review for it. Again, 10 out of 10 for me. This is a great movie. Go see it, however it's out. Anyway, that's me for now. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will catch you guys next time. See ya.